I've trained really hard for this movie. I started training whilst I was doing Star Trek 2 and carried on training with a trainer here in Hertfordshire when I got back, because I wanted Gary to be one of those death-defying, indestructible addicts, you know, who just shouldn't be alive.
He tries really hard. I mean, you leave him alone for 5 minutes, say you take a rest, and he'll be still in the mirror, going through his fight routine, trying to learn it. He puts a lot of effort in, and it pays off.
Everybody from, like, Simon, Nick, Martin, Eddie, Paddy and Ros were all really up for, like, the fight scenes and did a really good job.
My character, Peter, is the coward of the bunch, so I have to find different ways of hiding under tables and getting rescued by Rosamund. So we had to prepare for it, but we all did it with a laugh and a twinkle in our eye.
It was interesting kind of taking what I'd learned from Scott Pilgrim, which is obviously much more fantastical, and then putting it into a slightly more realistic environment. We wanted to sort of take, you know, what you think of as a British kind of bar brawl and infuse it with that speed and invention that you get in the Asian films.
It's definitely the most complex and accomplished film we've made, and Edgar has made these contacts along the way, and with the likes of Bill Pope and Brad Allen, you know, people who he'd worked with on Scott Pilgrim and has brought to the World's End, you know, people who are absolute leaders in their field.
I worked with Bill Pope on Scott Pilgrim. That was the first time we worked together, and had a fantastic working relationship with him. He's a very sort of uniquely talented in terms of, you don't find many people who are as good at shooting action as they are with performance. And I thought as well it might be interesting to get an American DP to shoot British pubs. So I thought he might give a more cinematic eye to British locations, which I think it does, you know. So that was the other idea. But I adore working with him, and like he's become a very great friend.
Bill is a wonderful guy, and you know, getting to work with the guy that lit The Matrix is obviously super cool for a nerd like me. So, you know, that is great. But it's just, you know, Edgar's just kind of like, he's just gathering this arsenal together, you know, of people, like-minded people, and it's great to be in that working environment.
Brad has an amazing team, you know. I think he's the only Westerner that works for Jackie Chan's crew, and that's his skill, is putting together long fight sequences, and, you know, there are some amazing ones.
I've worked with Hong Kong stuntmen before on something. It's very similar to that way of choreographing a fight. It's very precise. It's almost like a dance, the fight. It's so choreographed and cut together.
The way that these fights are designed is it seems to be one long shot.
You don't do a master shot, you don't do a big master wide, and you don't shoot it from lots of angles, you do lots of tiny pieces. So there's only one shot per fight section, which makes it easier for the actors and also kind of makes it easier to focus on, like, these 3 seconds.
Edgar knows what he wants, and I think working with Brad, who also knows how to get the shots and, you know, what angle to take it from, the two of them work really well together, and it's actually been really easy because they know exactly what I need to do, and they tell me what to do, and I do it to the best of my ability.
Go. Brad's fight choreography is just so inventive and dynamic, and his work with Damien Waters as well, and the stunt crew, you know, they're so smart in terms of what they're coming up with for us to do.
Action! Here!
Bloody hell.
Pete!
There's a great craft and a kind of dexterity that's required of actors when you do this, and there's a kind of choreography with the timing and all that, which I appreciate as a craft, really, and I wanted to work with people who I think were very good at it and learn from them.
Did you just fucking make that shit up just then?
The stunt team on this are amazing. A lot of them are really young, they're vibrant, they're super fit blokes who are seemingly capable of anything from gymnastics to martial arts. They have that kind of background, which is refreshing and really, really amazing to watch, the stuff that they can do.
About 7.5.
I mean, sure, I'm sounding like I'm in love, but I'm not, and you can't prove that I am.
Action.
Good.
Hey! Get your feet off her!
They are the best stunt team I've ever worked with. I couldn't believe them, how brilliant they were. Apart from Brad, all the lads are from up near where I live. They're up in Derby and that. I didn't even know Damien was up there. I didn't know he was capable of superhuman feats, you know. If you ever see a show reel, it's like mind-blowing.
Excuse me, you couldn't tell us where the World's End pub is, could you? No? Please, this way. This way. 100% David Walters. Or Brian Harvey.
Gary!
Nick Frost's gone through a few people. You know what I mean? He said to me today that he'd twatted a few, which he felt very, very bad about. But I'd imagine getting hit by Nick Frost and a stool would be quite painful.
There needs to be a mutual trust, otherwise they're going to get hurt, or I'm going to get hurt. You know what I mean? And we all, you know, we all got on really well, and we had a laugh, and we'd hang out, and there was a relationship there, and we wanted to do the best for them. You know, and certainly me and Simon we're of that same character where we want the stuntmen to be impressed by us slightly. You know what I mean? We like doing all our own stunts.
Sometimes with stuntmen and stunt fights, you lose the character in the choreography. You know, it suddenly there becomes a kind of stock way of fighting, regardless of the character you are. But these guys incorporate character in the story, so the fights, you don't leave the characters behind. It enhances the character and it enhances the audience appreciation of the character.
They kind of saw what kind of style I was most comfortable with, because there was a lot of like moves and, you know, trying to replicate someone kung fu punches or whatever the technique may be. But I think they sensed that I you know, my thing was in throwing like some nice big David haymakers, you know, in the bar and stuff, and more of a brawling style. So they adapted that to the stunt routines. They're brilliant. They're the best. It's been great having them around and working with them.
It's just been more fun than a lot of the other stunt sequences I've done in films. I mean, you always get into it, but this stuff is just fantastic because it's very, very violent and very, very funny. Because you're not really too worried about the violence because everybody's a robot. And we're working with this fantastic stunt team whose sort of primary aim is to kind of keep it silly.
There's this Jackie Chan film, Drunken Master, where Jackie can only fight when he's drunk. And this is a little bit of that where they're slightly loosened up when they have their first fight, and then as they continue to drink, it's like their fighting prowess seems to get better.
You get to do something on a film that you'd never do in real life, you know? I've never had a 10-man pub fight in a pub. I couldn't do it, I'd be tired after 2. And then the other 8 would kick the fuck out of me.
The scenes in the film are quite ambitious for the budget of the movie, so you really have to just kind of plan everything. You have to know exactly what you're doing and board the entire thing out. And then it becomes a team effort between like practical effects, prosthetics, physical effects, digital effects, the stunt team, the camera. You're all working together to like pull off these kind of tricks, some of which are in camera and some of which are digital and some of which are a mix of both. Nearly all of them are a mix of the two.
The thing about the World's End and the look of the World's End is interesting because we're working very closely with the prosthetics designers, Waldo and Matt, animatronics designer. So it's that mixture of disciplines, I think, that's going to make it really interesting.
It's been great with Brad and Co because they really sort of take a scene and just explore it and just
put a whole new twist on it, which is great for us. And they've been really good about using our stuff as well. They're always really keen to sort of push it and see what else we can do and what else we can give them.
Okay, guys, here we go. Shooting, please.
This is a very prosthetics-heavy film, so we're using prosthetics on amputees, as well as CG to accomplish these decapitations and the fight sequences.
Oh, crumbs, you're heavy.
When visual effects first started to come in, people were very nervous and thinking, oh, computers are going to replace all the things we do. But I think it's actually meant that we're able to do more. We can do these creatures that we've not been able to do before. But the creatures need to react with something, and quite often there needs to be some real physical reaction with that.
We wouldn't have been able to do this film without any physical effects. Waldo's physical effects, Chris's special effects, Brad's stunts, you know, the legs, the Martin's head break, the blanks, all of that stuff has a physical base. And more can be done as a result of all of these things existing together.
So this is one of the wax heads we've made for one sequence of the film. This is for the twins' heads being smashed. This particular one we couldn't use because it was very thin at the back and it leaks, so we couldn't fill it with liquid as we were supposed to, so this is kind of a reject. We keep them in the fridge just to make sure they're as brittle as they can be, and then we either throw them, hit them with a pipe, stamp on them, or punch them.
We're sort of using our imagination because the foes are not anything like generic. It's not like zombies where, you know, there's a certain look to a zombie. It's like, oh, we created sort of a new baddie with a particular kind of like colour scheme and look and logic and physicality to their body.
We envisaged like there'd be a shell and it's 2 layers of, you know, whatever material they're made out of, and they should shatter, but there should be a goop in there as well, and all those things. And I just thought I've got to do, you know, a bit of art for this. Early on in pre-production, Edgar was keen to get a visual representation of the network and ultimately the voice that is at the end of the movie that reveals itself to Simon and Nick. We were just thinking of the signal strength symbol, which is that universal 3 bars that get bigger. So we just did 2 together basically. So you've got 1 in the middle and 2 bars either side, and that's at 5 lines.
The reconstituted sort of Newton Haven has the new symbol on it, and it appears on the school uniform, it appears on the town sign, and various other bits of graphics scattered about. But yeah, probably the most predominant place that you'll see it is on the beer pumps.
It's just this sort of omnipresent, you know, thing that maybe people would pick up on, but, you know, hopefully they'll pick up on it the second time they watch it.
It was kind of easier with something like Shaun of the Dead because it's like we all know how zombies are supposed to move, and we could try and veer a little bit from that, but there was a certain movement vocabulary that people were expecting. And in this, where it's a little bit more along the lines of body snatchers, it's much more subtle.
How's that looking? Normal. Very normal.
You want it to build slowly, so at first you're like, oh yeah, it's just some people sitting in a pub, and then you're like, wait a minute, did they just drink at the same time? Oh, coincidence. And then later it's like, no, it's not a coincidence, and the eagle-eyed viewer will slowly sort of start picking up on these things, kind of with the idea that there was a group think going on.
Holy shit! This is all connected.
When the blanks get decapitated, they are like action figures. Like, you know, when you used to have your toys, their arms would come off and there'd be a very clean peg and a clean socket. That's what the blanks have. So Waldo Mason has made us the the socket piece. So we'll walk it onto the set, shoot it in the same lighting conditions, and that'll be our CG reference.
Lots of parts are interchangeable and removable. So all of our arms that get pulled off are magnetic, but then you can lock an arm off and you can lock all the joints into different positions, so you can have them, completely floppy or semi-rigid. And the stunt boys really like it because they can throw these things around.
This little baby on the end here is from prosthetics, and this is what lives in the wrist of the blanks. So when Eddie Marsan takes his hand off, this is what is revealed on his arm. I'll do a pass in a minute. When I hold it in frame and just show it to the camera like this, because then when the clever chaps in Soho come to put the wrist section in, they can use this as Eddie Marsan's plug, I guess you'd call it, in his arm.
My name's Brian Herring and I am a puppeteer, and I've been brought in to do severed hand acting. Because the hands are removable, they'll just remove my arm from here down. This is a piece that Waldo Mason's guys have built, and then they'll just take me out digitally from there upwards. I should be crouched behind them, and they'll just fill in the blanks.
I think the best effects are where they're a combination of physical effects and digital effects. And that's what most of the movie is that there are things really happening, but we use digital augmentation to kind of make them impossible,
It's mental in there. I mean, really, really mental. I mean, you come to work and there are body parts all over the floor. There's, blue ink on my coat. There's, blue stuff on my face. And I've just taken somebody's arm off.
There's a lot of effects with, headless people, which is something back in the 80s or 90s you'd have to do with a dummy and somebody kind of going like that. But now you can actually shoot the fight scenes in a very free-form way and, rub things out, which is good, because then you do these fight scenes where it's the only thing you really have to remember is, not to look there or not to touch there, because it's not there.
This is the animatronic head version of Greg, which gets taken off in the film and rolls across the toilet floor and ends up coming to life on the toilet floor.
After my head's been knocked off by the urinal, I have to these little dots for the visual effects team to just cut off afterwards. So I've got to keep my head back whilst fighting, so that gets picked up on camera.
Where we're replacing backgrounds behind people's heads, where their heads are going to be missing, what we do a lot of the time is shoot a repeat pass, and it's not a precise repeat pass, it's just an approximation. Camera operators are normally very good at doing the same thing twice, and then we just lay it in later.
There's only one Gary King!
God, there's no. I thought there'd be a real kind of jolt, and there isn't. No, that's where the acting element comes in. Yeah. Can my digital double do that? I don't really like acting. So basically, we have the VFX stand-in head, which has the brake already worked into it, which they hold into shot at the end of everything they do with Martin post-break. We're taking that and adding a wax top to it, which will break, and it's blue on the inside as per all the smashing heads we've done, with some hair on the back just for VFX reference, and they'll blend it seamlessly in with footage of Martin having his head smashed with a stool on set.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but we went through a series of tests to see what was the best way to smash these heads. We found a bit of gas pipe was the best, and we smashed these heads, and we got a good break. We shot them in slow motion, so we had more frames of these smashing heads.
Bang! So yeah, the break in the head will match to what we've done with Martin. Everything's kind of come off this template, and we've all the dots that went on Martin's face were done from a template of this as well. So they should all fit exactly the same way.
Andy? What the fuck?
Yes, Andy. What the fuck? Oliver ends up in the sort of post-apocalyptic world with half blank head, so he's been replaced by a blank. So his blank self has lost the top of his head, and he's replaced it with a sort of football on which he has drawn two eyes.
To basically create the makeup, we took a head cast of Martin, and we sculpted the makeup in a modelling clay as a whole, incorporating the football and some prosthetic appliances which basically cheat out Martin's face The whole process took about 3.5, 4 hours to apply. So for Martin, it was quite a time-consuming process.
It's kind of weird. You do feel strangely bovine when you're inside this. Like a sort of a dumb animal.
With all sort of actors, especially more sort of high-profile actors, you're never sure how they're going to take to the whole, knife casting, makeup application, especially big sort of goofy numbers like a broken head and a football stuck on top. But he's been fantastic throughout. He's really bought into it.
It does take your eyes a second to adjust.
Just adjust
Yeah,
once you take it off.
Yeah. The thing is a great design. It's a really, really funny thing. It's really stupid and I love it.
It's funny, people always talk about Star Trek or something as like the first time the flares have been ever used, but they go back as far as Easy Rider or Cabaret, or then Die Hard was the 80s film that really started to use flares. Whereas in things like sort of, Star Trek or Transformers, anamorphic flares are like kind of like this glossy, like dressing. We wanted the anamorphic flares to be the baddies. So the villains of the film are anamorphic flares.
These are the headlight goggles for our blanks, which were designed. Let me give you a little. There you go. So these came out from an early meeting with Edgar, and he needed these glowing eyes. And I went through, I don't know how many, probably 15 different LED design to try and get this nice focused beam.
Matt Denton did a really good job on designing the glasses, and we ended up manufacturing them in the end. The first time you see the highlights is they all come on together, and that just meant that we had to have a cable from every single person in the beehive, which tended to got into a bit of a spaghetti junction in the end. So that was a challenge, that bit.
Wind your feet, come on.
Possibly the daftest rig we've ever built, and it's just a light source for the statue. So it's just to give them this spotlight effect. So that is the height. That's 14 foot to the height of the statue's head. So I'll be walking along, searching for various people, I guess.
Basically, we use this for lighting reference. So in this scene we can have the bronze statue, and the bronze statue is completely CG, so we have to have some reference of where the lights were on the day, like the ones up here and lighting it up there. So basically in the reflection you can see where all the lights were. You feed that into the computer and then that lights the CG basically.
Here we go. And 3, 2, 1, action!
So this is our animatronic arm for Tyler, who gets his arm taken off, and the arm comes back to life and starts fighting Gary.
Probably 100 and odd parts in it in total, all designed from scratch for this job. Attacks in. The next bit we've got to do is lay it into the mould. That's kind of the scary bit for the mechanic, because we flood all that with silicon rubber, and it feels like it's the last time you're ever going to see the mechanism. So it's a bit of a tense moment. That really.
Almost.
We are outside the World's End pub. This is the part in the film where the world is quite literally ending. There's a plasma wave forming inside the bowels of the earth. It's coming out through the floor of the pub, and the pub is going to be the source of this expanding plasma wave that consumes the English countryside.
Because there wasn't time in the shooting schedule to wait for us to reset some of the sequences, we wired in 3 takes worth of pyrotechnics on the front of the building. So dangled off the front of the building off of all the various bits and pieces were lots of spark effects to make it look as if the whole pub was short-circuiting with the plasma wave that was then about to erupt from the inside of it.
For Edgar, the key was that this plasma wave was kind of destroying the English countryside, and he had this vision of fires spreading along hedgerows and this kind of domino effect. So we sort of went away with those kind of thoughts in our head as to how this thing should look.
As they try to escape the town, they're trying to actually physically outrun the plasma wave.
which I've never tried before, but I pretty much assume you can't do. So in order to do that, we had to build a giant generator on a truck and cover it with large red lights that pursue our picture vehicle with our actors in it.
It has the desired effect of lighting up the entire area in this kind of hellish red glow. And so the combination of the sort of leaves, the CG leaves, the embers, the practical light, and the lightning bolts give us this really fierce kind of effect that makes you feel like, okay, I need to get away from this thing.
It's fantastic, you know, it's a really creative environment and everyone's just really kind of wants to come up with new groundbreaking stuff to do.
To be fair, the animatronic side of stuff, I mean, there's some really nice stuff in there for us, like the head and the animatronic arm we're building.
We don't always get to make a fence where somebody falls back through it and then all the bulbs explode. We don't get to make collapsing benches when stuntmen fall on them and things like that. So it's great. There's a lot of really nice stuff to make. In fact, I mean, even my team was saying how good it's been, this job, to have so many challenging things to make.
Yeah, I mean, Edgar puts so much into everything, into every frame. You get good value, I think, with Edgar Wright.
3, 2, 1.